The storm had already taken everything from me once. That night, it came back like an old enemy, roaring against the thin roof, rattling the window frames, clawing at the door as if it remembered my weakness. The power had gone hours ago. Only a candle flickered on the table, trembling like my heartbeat. My son, Rui, slept in the corner, wrapped in an old quilt, his small hand gripping the edge of my worn shawl. The wind howled, and I prayed the roof would hold, that the rain would spare us just this one night. Then, through the thunder, I heard it, a faint cry. At first, I thought it was the storm's echo, or a stray animal, but then it came again. A man's voice, low, broken, close. Help. Someone. I froze. My fingers tightened around the candle holder. No one came down this road at night. The nearest neighbor was half a mile away, and the river beyond the field had already overflowed. Still, I couldn't ignore it. I glanced at Rui. His breathing was slow, peaceful. I pulled the shawl tighter and opened the door. The wind nearly tore it from my hands. Rain lashed against my face as I stepped into the darkness. There, in the mud by the fence, was a figure collapsed, soaked, barely moving. Sir? I called over the storm. No answer. I rushed closer, kneeling beside him. His clothes were ruined, a torn shirt, mud smeared across his arms. He was breathing, but faintly, his lips pale, eyes closed. You'll freeze, I whispered. I tried shaking him. His head lolled, his skin cold as stone. I didn't think, I just acted. I slid my arms under his shoulders and dragged him toward the house, slipping and stumbling through the wet ground. He was heavy, his boots sinking deep in the mud. Lightning flashed, and for a moment, I saw his face, blood trickling from his temple, lashes long against his pale skin. He couldn't be from this village. His hands were smooth, not the hands of a farmer. When I finally pulled him through the door, I was shaking too hard to speak. Rui stirred in his sleep. Mama, it's all right, I panted. Go back to bed. I laid the man by the fire and covered him with the last blanket we had. My fingers trembled as I touched his wrist. Still a pulse, weak but there. His clothes were soaked through. I hesitated, then fetched one of my late husband's shirts and wiped his face clean. He groaned softly. His eyes opened halfway, dark, glassy, confused. Why? Help. A stranger? He whispered. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Because you're human. Because you'll die if I don't. He blinked, trying to focus on me, then slipped back into unconsciousness. For the next few hours, I kept the fire alive, spooning small bits of hot broth to his lips, whispering words I couldn't even hear over the wind. At one point, Rue woke and crawled to my side. Who is he? I don't know, I said softly. Just someone who needs warmth. He studied the man for a moment. Is he like Papa? The question sliced through me like the wind outside. I forced a smile. No, sweetheart. He's just lost. Ruin nodded and went back to sleep beside the fire, his head resting near my lap. I looked at the man again, his brow furrowed even in sleep, like he was fighting something invisible. I didn't notice when the candle burned down to its end. Only the storm kept count of the hours. By dawn, the rain had stopped. The air smelled of wet earth and smoke. I stirred the embers and turned toward the blanket. It was empty. My heart skipped. I looked around. The door was open, wind curling through the frame. He was gone. I stepped outside, barefoot on the damp porch. The fog still clung to the fields, curling around the old fence like ghosts, and there, in the mud, were his footprints, large, clear, leading down the road toward the river. He had left without a word. No note, no name. For a long moment, I just stood there, clutching my shawl. The storm had taken my husband years ago, his boat swallowed by a river much like this one, and now, it had taken another soul from my doorstep. But this time, I had pulled him back first. I walked down the path until the fog swallowed his tracks, then turned back toward my home. Inside, Rui was awake, rubbing his eyes. Mama, where did he go? I smiled faintly, though my heart ached with emptiness. I didn't understand. Wherever the sky sends him, I suppose. He frowned. Will he come back? I don't know, baby. He thought for a moment. You gave him our blanket. I did. Then he'll come back. Good people always do. That day, the sun returned, shy but real. I hung our wet clothes by the fire and swept away the puddles. The house looked smaller in daylight, lonelier too, every few minutes. I caught myself glancing at the door, half expecting to hear a knock, to see his face again, but the door stayed quiet. When night fell, I found myself sitting by the same spot, near the window, staring at the path where the footprints had vanished. Maybe I'd been foolish. Maybe kindness really was something the world only punished. Still, as I wrapped my arms around Rui and watched the candle flicker again, I whispered to the shadows, "Whoever you were, I hope the storm spared you this time." Outside, the fog thickened, curling through the trees like breath. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again, softer, almost like a heartbeat fading into memory. And though I didn't know it then, the man whose life I'd saved would soon return to change mine forever. The morning after the storm, the sky looked scrubbed clean, too bright to calm, as if pretending it hadn't screamed all night. But the village never forgot what storms left behind. By the time I went out to fetch water, the whispers had already begun. She dragged a man into her house in the middle of the night. I heard she kept him till dawn. Knave women end up with regrets. Their voices were sharp, slicing through the soft air like knives. I kept my head down and my bucket steady, pretending not to hear, pretending I didn't feel the eyes following me all the way back to my gate. My small house looked even smaller in daylight, the patchy roof, the cracked door, the fire that refused to stay lit. Rui was sitting on the floor, drawing with a piece of charcoal, humming to himself. "Morning, Mama," he said, beaming. "Morning, my love." I set the bucket down and knelt beside him. "What are you drawing?" He turned the board toward me. A stick figure woman with a smaller one beside her, and a tall man under the rain. "That's us," he said. "And that's the man you saved." I smiled faintly. "He's very tall." Ruin nodded solemnly. "Because he'll come back." I laughed softly. "You sound sure." He shrugged. "Good people always do." His certainty hurt more than the gossip, because deep down, I wanted to believe him. By noon, I went to the market to trade bread for salt. Every step was a reminder of how quickly kindness turns to suspicion when you're poor and alone. Old Mrs. Zhao leaned over her stall as I passed. "I heard about your guest, she said, lips pursed. "You should be careful. Stray men bring trouble." I forced a polite smile. "He was hurt. I couldn't leave him outside." She sniffed. "That's how it always starts. Pity makes fools of women." I wanted to say something to tell her that compassion isn't foolish, that sometimes helping a stranger is the only way to prove the world hasn't turned entirely cruel. But I didn't. You can't reason with fear disguised as wisdom. When I returned home, Rui was waiting by the door, excitement dancing in his eyes. "Mama, look." He held something small and shiny in his hand. A tea first. I thought it was a coin, but as the light hit it, I saw it. A gold cufflink engraved with a crest I didn't recognize. "Where did you find this?" I asked. "Under the blanket," he said proudly. "It fell when you helped him." I turned it over, the metal warm from his palm. Fine craftsmanship. Not something a poor man would wear. So the stranger wasn't a drifter after all. The thought made my stomach twist with curiosity. With unease, I set the cufflink on the table. "We'll keep it safe until he returns." Rui grinned. "See? I told you he wasn't gone forever." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the roof sounded like footsteps, every gust of wind like a knock. I watched the cufflink glint in the candlelight, and questions circled my mind like vultures. Who was he? Why was he out there alone? And if he was rich, important, even what could have driven him into the storm? The candle burned low, and I told myself it didn't matter, that I'd done what was right, and the rest was in fate's hands. But something in my heart whispered otherwise, that the story between us wasn't over yet. The following morning, I walked Rui to school. The path was still muddy from the rain, the air thick with the smell of wet soil. A group of villagers stood by the well, talking. When they saw me, the conversation stopped. One of them, a man named Lao Peng, sneered. "So, the storm brought you a visitor, eh? Maybe he took something before he left." "He took nothing," I said evenly. "Then maybe he took your sense." Another laughed. I ignored them and kept walking. Rui squeezed my hand tighter. "Why do they talk like that, Mama?" "Because they don't understand kindness," I said softly. "And what people don't understand, they fear." He nodded, his little brow furrowed. "Then we don't have to be like them, right?" I smiled. "No, we don't." When we reached home that evening, a strange stillness lingered in the air. The sun was low, casting long shadows through the doorway. On the table lay the cufflink. Beside it, a single rose. My breath caught. It was fresh, its petals still damp, as if plucked only moments ago. I rushed to the door and looked outside, but the road was empty. No footprints this time, only silence. I held the rose close, its scent faint but unmistakably real. Did he come back, Mama? Rui asked from the doorway. I looked at the horizon, the fading sun melting into gold and crimson. I don't know, I whispered. But he hasn't forgotten us. Rui's eyes lit up. Then maybe he's watching from far away. Maybe, I said, my heart aching with a strange mix of fear and hope. I set the rose in a glass of water beside the cufflink. The two gleamed together in the fading light, a promise and a mystery side by side. As night fell, thunder rumbled faintly in the distance again. But this time, I wasn't afraid. Because somewhere out there, beyond the hills and the gossip and the loneliness, someone who had once whispered, "Why help a stranger?" now knew the answer. And though he had left without a word, I could feel it deep inside. He would return, because storms don't just take. Sometimes they bring things back. Before the night I found the stranger in the storm, there was another storm. One that never left my heart. It was 3 years ago. The sky had the same wild light, the same anger in its voice. My husband, Wen, had gone to the river that evening to check his fishing nets. I begged him to wait till morning. But work doesn't wait when poverty breathes down your neck. He kissed Rui's forehead, smiled at me and said, "Don't worry, the storm will pass." It did. And single quotes by midnight. The thunder grew monstrous, shaking the walls. I waited by the window, lantern trembling in my hand. Every flash of lightning painted the path white and empty. When the neighbors found his boat overturned at dawn, they said it was an accident. I called it cruelty. After that, I stopped listening to rain. I couldn't bear its sound. It felt like memory, like a voice whispering what it had taken. For months I spoke little. I kept busy cleaning, sewing, baking, anything to silence the echo of if only. Rui was only 5 then. He didn't understand death, just absence. One night he asked, "Did Papa go where the stars live?" I nodded, "Yes, love." "Then why do you cry when they shine?" "Because grief glows brightest when the world sleeps." I tried to move forward. I sold Wen's fishing gear to pay for food and kept only one thing, a framed photograph, slightly water damaged, of him laughing with his arm around me. The smile in that picture was what I lived on, every year since. When storms returned, I lit a candle beneath it. "Stay away from the river," I would whisper. But storms don't listen to prayers. So when I found that stranger in the rain, half dead and shivering on the road, I didn't think I remembered. I remembered the way Wen's fingers slipped from mine when the lightning struck. I remembered what it felt like to lose someone because no one reached out in time. Helping that man wasn't courage. It was atonement. A small, desperate attempt to keep another family from mourning, like mine had. The days after he vanished blurred together. Life returned to its usual rhythm. Work, hunger, gossip. But every night, when I looked at the cufflink and the rose, the past and the present blurred too. Sometimes I caught myself wondering if fate had sent me a test or a second chance. One evening, while Rua played outside, I sat by the old photograph and whispered, "Wen, did you see me that night? Did I do the right thing?" The wind slipped through the cracks, flickering the candlelight. For a heartbeat, I imagined it was his answer, a soft sigh saying yes, and then I wept. Not from sadness, but from the strange relief of finally doing what I couldn't that night at the river. Saving someone. A week passed. The village's gossip moved on to something else, a neighbor's lost goat, the coming harvest. But inside me, something had shifted. I found myself baking again, humming again, doing small things that felt almost like living. Ruin noticed. "You smile more now," he said one morning. "Do I?" He nodded. "Maybe the man you saved took the sadness with him." I smiled, ruffling his hair. Maybe he did, but part of me knew the truth. I hadn't been healed by his leaving but by the act of saving. That evening, the sky turned gray again, the kind that promised another storm. My hands shook as I closed the shutters. Rua saw it. "Are you scared?" "No." I lied. "Just remembering." He ran to fetch the candle and set it near Wen's photograph. "Then we don't need to be afraid. Papa will watch." The flame danced, soft and steady. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like hiding from the thunder, because this time, if the storm came, I was ready to face it. As night fell, I dreamed of two storms, one that took, and one that returned. In the dream, they met in the middle of the road, rain swirling around them, and from that chaos walked a man with a rose in his hand. When I woke, the candle had burned down to wax. Outside, the world was silent, but something deep in my chest whispered, "He's coming back." I didn't know why I believed it. Maybe because for the first time since Wen's death, I wanted to. I stood by the door, looking out at the gray sky. 3 years ago, I lost everything to a storm. This time, maybe just maybe the storm was bringing something back. I closed my eyes, letting the wind brush my face like a memory forgiven, and though I didn't see him yet, I could almost hear his voice again, low and weak from that night, asking, why help a stranger? Because I knew now what I didn't then. Because the woman who couldn't save her husband had finally saved someone else. I told myself kindness would never hurt again. But I was wrong. Because mercy, like love, always leaves a mark. And mine was just beginning to bloom, a week after the storm. Life had already folded back into its quiet rhythm. Until the world arrived at my doorstep in black polished shoes. That morning began like any other, Rui chasing chickens in the yard. The smell of rice porridge simmering on the stove, the sun timid behind a veil of mist. I was kneeling by the garden when the sound of engines rolled down our muddy road, engines plural. I straightened, wiping my hands on my apron. A convoy of sleek black cars turned the corner, shining like mirrors, foreign against the dirt and green of our little village. People began to gather by their gates, whispers fluttering like startled birds. What in heaven's name? Someone muttered. The cars stopped right outside my fence. Doors opened in perfect unison, and then, through the ripples of curiosity and dust, he stepped out. A T first. I didn't recognize him. He was taller somehow, standing straight, framed by a suit that cost more than my house. His hair was neatly brushed, his face clean, but his eyes, those eyes were the same, dark, deep, searching. The eyes of the man who had asked me, why help a stranger? My heart stuttered. He held something in his hand, a bouquet of red roses wrapped in rain-kissed paper. The villagers gasped. Who's that? Why is he here? I wanted to melt into the ground. He approached the gate slowly, as if afraid one wrong move might send me running. Mrs. Lin Mai? He said softly. His voice was richer now, steadier, but it carried the same warmth I'd heard through the storm. I nodded, unable to speak. He smiled, the kind of smile that knew gratitude but didn't know how to contain it. You dragged me from death. I came back to thank you. I swallowed hard. You should have sent a letter. I tried, he said, half smiling. But I didn't know your name. Only your kindness. Behind him, men in suits waited by the cars, whispering into earpieces. The entire village stared like they were watching a dream stumble into daylight. He noticed my nervousness and lowered his voice. May I come in? I hesitated. My house isn't. He glanced around at the broken fence, the faded paint, the smoke curling from the chimney, and finished my sentence gently. Big enough for guests like me? I didn't answer. He smiled again. It's big enough for gratitude. Inside, he ducked under the doorway, setting the bouquet on the table. The fragrance filled the tiny room, chasing away the smell of damp wood. Rui peeked out from behind the curtain, eyes wide. Is this your son? He asked. I nodded. Rui, say hello. Rui stepped forward shyly. Are you the man Mama saved? He crouched to the boy's level, his expensive watch catching the sunlight. I am, and you must be the brave one who shared your blanket. Rui grinned. Mama said you left without saying thank you. A flicker of guilt crossed his face. Then I must fix that. Shouldn't I? He reached into his coat and pulled out a small box. Inside lay a delicate silver locket shaped like a raindrop. For your mother, he said. A reminder that storms don't last forever. I froze. I can't accept that. It's not payment, he said gently. It's a promise. As he rose, I noticed the subtle limp in his step, the faint scar near his temple. You're healed, I murmured. He nodded. Because of you. The villagers outside were still watching. I could feel their curiosity pressing against the windows. Why come back here? I asked quietly. You owe me nothing. He looked at me for a long time before answering. When I opened my eyes that morning and saw your house, I realized something. You didn't just save my life. You reminded me what it means to be alive. I blinked. You talk like a poet. He smiled. I'm a businessman. But near death, even numbers start to sound like prayers. He turned toward the window, the roses glowing behind him like small fires. My name is Liang Zhen. I'm the CEO of Zen Group. The words barely registered. CEO, Group. Those belong to newspapers, not people who bled in the rain. He looked back at me. I came here to ask something, Mrs. Lin. Let me help you. You shouldn't live like this. My chest tightened. We manage fine. He shook his head. You survive. That's not the same. I don't need charity, I said quietly. Then don't think of it as charity, he replied. Think of it as balance. You saved me. Let me save you from struggle. For a moment, silence filled the room. The candle flickered. The clock ticked. Finally, I said, I wouldn't know where to begin. He reached into his coat again, this time taking out a small envelope. Inside was a card embossed with gold letters. My company runs a foundation in the city. We have openings for staff positions with housing, schooling support, stable work. I stared at the card, my fingers trembling. I can't leave my home, I whispered. He smiled gently. You said that to the storm once, didn't you? And yet you opened your door. The words hit me like thunder. I didn't answer. Couldn't. He placed the card on the table beside the roses. Take your time. I'll be in the city for 2 weeks. If you change your mind, call this number. No promises, no debt, just opportunity. He turned to go, then paused at the door. Rain had started again, light this time, tapping against the glass like memory. He looked back, eyes soft. Thank you, for the warmth I didn't know I was missing. And with that, he stepped outside, the black car swallowing him once more. When the engines faded into distance, Rui tugged my sleeve. Mama, will we go to the city? I looked down at the roses, red alive, fragrant, their petals catching the rain through the half-open window. I don't know, I said softly, but I think the storm left us a path. That night, I placed the roses beside one's photograph. Do you see this? I whispered to the man I lost. Someone else almost joined you that night. And maybe he was sent to bring us back into the light. The candle flickered. The house breathed. Outside, the storm began to fade, leaving behind only the scent of rain and roses. And for the first time in 3 years, I didn't fear the thunder, because somehow, I knew it wasn't coming to take anymore. It was coming to return. What? I thought I'd lost. 2 days after Liang Zhen's visit, I still couldn't stop staring at the roses. They had dried slightly around the edges, their petals curling like they were holding onto a secret. I told myself it meant nothing, that his visit was gratitude, not fate. But every time I looked at them, I remembered the rain on his face, the way his voice softened when he said, let me save you from struggle. Rui, of course, had already made up his mind. We're going to the city, he said with the confidence only a child could have. That man said it's safe. I smiled weakly. The city isn't magic, Rui, he grinned. Maybe not, but he is. 3 days later, I stood at the edge of the train platform with a small bag of clothes, my son's hand in mine, and my heart trembling between fear and hope. The city air hit us like a wave thick with perfume, exhaust, and ambition. Tall buildings scraped the sky, lights blinking even in daylight. A driver in uniform held up a card with my name on it. Mrs. Lin Mai, he said politely. Mr. Liang sent me. He led us to a black car so clean it reflected our stunned faces. Rui pressed his fingers against the glass, whispering, it's like a mirror on wheels. I couldn't help but laugh when the car stopped before a mansion with marble gates and carved stone lions. My laughter died. The house looked like it had been pulled out of a dream. Wide staircases, silver lanterns, windows that shone like gold. My entire village could have fit inside the garden. A maid opened the door, bowing slightly. Welcome, madam. Mr. Liang is expecting you. I almost turned around right there. I think there's been a mistake, but then I saw him, standing at the top of the steps, hands in his pockets, calm and composed, dressed in white this time instead of black. Not a mistake, he said softly. A beginning. Inside, everything glowed. The chandeliers sparkled like stars. The floors gleamed so bright. I hesitated to step forward. Rui, wide-eyed, ran toward a grand piano in the corner. Can I touch it? Liang Zhen smiled faintly. If you promise not to play thunder. Rui giggled. Only sunshine. His laugh echoed through the hall, a sound that filled a space clearly unused to joy. He led me to a sunlit sitting room where tea steamed on a low table. This is your home now, he said. I shook my head. No, I can't live here, then work here, he said, unbothered. My daughter needs a tutor and a steady hand. She's 7. Sharp tongue, softer heart. I hesitated. A nanny? He nodded. A teacher, a guardian, a reminder that kindness still exists in this house. Why me? Because you remind me of what survival looks like and I want her to learn it. That afternoon, I met the girl. Her name was Yue, a delicate child with curious eyes and a guarded smile. She studied me like a puzzle. Are you my new nanny? She asked, "If you'll have me." I said, "Papa says you saved him from a dragon storm." I smiled. "Then I suppose you could call me a knight." She laughed, the first sound of pure joy I'd heard in that echoing house. Days passed. Slowly, the mansion began to feel less like a cage and more like a strange kind of sanctuary. I woke before dawn, packed Rui's school lunch, braided Yua's hair, and prepared breakfast. Sometimes when I looked up, I'd catch Liang Zhen standing in the doorway, half hidden, watching Dotati first. His gaze unsettled me, too intense, too silent. But over time, it softened into something else. One evening, as I cleared the table, he said quietly, "You've changed the sound of this house." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "It used to echo," he said, looking around. "Now it breathes." Rumors began to swirl, of course. The staff whispered when they thought I couldn't hear, about the widowed woman who'd come from the countryside, about the way their boss smiled more often now. I ignored them. I had work, children, and memories to keep me busy. Still, some nights, when I walked past the hall, I'd see something that made me pause. A single rose, always fresh, left outside my door. The first time, I thought it was the maid. The second time, a coincidence. By the third, I found a note beneath the stem. "Thank you for reminding me what warmth feels like." No signature, but none was needed. I held the paper for a long time, tracing the letters with trembling fingers. The man I had saved from the rain was saving me back. Not with money, not with grand gestures, but with the quiet tenderness of someone learning to feel again. That night, as I tucked you into bed, she said sleepily, "Papa talks about you when he thinks I'm not listening." My heart skipped. "Oh." She nodded. "He says you make the storms in his head quieter." I didn't know what to say. I just smiled and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Then let's hope the sun stays out." But later, alone in my small guest room, I stared at the rose and realized something terrifying. The storm wasn't over. It had simply changed shape, and this time, it wasn't thunder I feared, it was the way my heart beat when he smiled. It started with a whisper in the mansion corridor. By the end of the week, it was printed in black ink for the whole city to see. "Widowed nanny seduces her boss CEO's secret love nest exposed." I didn't have to buy the newspaper. The maid left it folded on the kitchen counter, her hands shaking. Rui's schoolmate's mother started avoiding me. Yua's driver stopped talking on the way to class. And everywhere I went, eyes followed, curious, cruel, hungry for scandal. When Liang Zhen came home that night, his face was carved in stone. He threw the paper onto the table between us. "They have no proof," he said tightly. "They're just trying to hurt me." I swallowed hard. "Then why does it feel like they're hurting me?" He looked up, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked unsure. "Because you shouldn't be paying the price for my name." Outside, cameras flashed through the gates like lightning. I heard shouting, reporters yelling questions neither of us could answer. "Is it true, Mr. Liang? Did you bring your mistress home?" I flinched. He reached out, his fingers brushing mine. "Don't listen." But how do you ignore voices that pierce walls? The next morning, the board demanded a statement. He left before dawn, tie crooked, exhaustion written across his face. By noon, I received the text that ended my piece. "Stay inside. Don't speak to anyone." By afternoon, his assistant arrived with tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Lin, please, for his sake, you should leave. Just for a while." My throat burned. "He asked you to tell me that?" She hesitated. "He's fighting everyone right now. If you stay, they'll destroy him." I looked around the quiet house, the one that had begun to feel alive again, and suddenly it was just walls and shadows once more. That night, I packed Rui's clothes. Yue came running into the room, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Where are you going?" she cried. "I have to," I whispered. "For your father." She shook her head fiercely. "He needs you here. You make him smile. You make him eat breakfast." Her small hands gripped my sleeve, and I wanted nothing more than to stay. But I knew what the world does to women like me, and to men who try to protect them. "I'll come back when the storm clears," I promised. She sobbed into my shoulder. "Then make it hurry." We left before sunrise. No goodbye, no farewell, just silence. I rented a small room near Rui's school and took a kitchen job at a bakery. Each day, flour clung to my hands like ghosts. Each night, I stared at my phone, waiting for his name to light the screen. It never did. The world had moved on, but I still felt his presence in every hum of traffic, every scent of rain. 2 weeks later, his face appeared on every news broadcast. I turned up the volume just in time to hear his voice, calm but rough-edged, standing behind a podium. The woman you call my mistress saved my life when I was left to die in a storm. She is not my scandal. She is my reason to still believe in decency. Flashes exploded, reporters shouting questions. But he didn't flinch. If loving her is a sin, he said, eyes steady on the cameras, then I'll live unholy and happy. The screen went black after that. But my heart kept replaying his words. That night, I sat on the bakery steps, rain soaking through my apron, laughing and crying all at once. The man who once spoke like winter now burned brighter than summer, and though I wasn't beside him anymore, I finally understood what we had given each other. I had pulled him from death, and he had dragged me back into the light. When I came home, Rui was half asleep on the couch. He opened his eyes, whispering, "Mama, why are you smiling?" "Because," I said softly, "someone remembered us." "Will he find us again?" I kissed his forehead. "Maybe, but this time, he won't need to search the world." The rain outside turned gentle, no longer thunder, just a rhythm, like footsteps approaching through the dark. Somewhere in the city, cameras were still flashing, deals still breaking, power still collapsing. But none of that mattered anymore, because for once, a storm had chosen truth over lies, and I knew in my bones our story wasn't finished yet. The morning after his press conference, the headlines changed their tone but not their cruelty. CEO Liang Zhen admits affair company in crisis. Zen Group shares plummet after scandal confession. They called his honesty recklessness. They called my existence a mistake. I kept the television off. The only sound in our little apartment was the kettle hissing and Rui's soft humming as he drew at the table. Still, I could feel the weight of every word the world was throwing at him. Each one landed in my chest as if it were aimed at me. 2.by the third day, reporters had found our street. They didn't knock, they prowled. I kept the curtains shut and my son close. When my phone finally buzzed, I almost dropped it. "Liang Zhen," I resigned. "Liang Zhen, don't be afraid. I'll fix this." Then nothing more. That night, I dreamed of the mansion again, only this time the lights were off, the windows boarded, the roses wilted. I woke before dawn, drenched in sweat. The city outside was still, but my heart pounded like thunder waiting to break. A week later, the bakery owner came to me quietly. "Someone's here to see you." I stepped into the alley behind the shop and froze. He was there, in no suit, no entourage, no power clinging to him, just a man in a simple coat, rain darkening his hair. His eyes were tired but alive. "I told you not to come," I said. "I don't take orders anymore," he replied softly. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Only the rain filled the silence, soft and constant. Finally, I asked, "What have you done?" He gave a small, humorless laugh. "Everything they said I would never do. I walked away." "From your company?" "From everything that was killing me." He looked at me then, really looked. And in his gaze I saw the man I met that night in the storm, raw, stripped of titles, searching for warmth. "I lost the board," he continued. "Investors, friends, even the mansion. They say I've fallen." I swallowed hard. "And have you?" He stepped closer, the rain dripping from his coat. "Maybe, but it feels more like landing." We stood under the narrow awning, the distance between us shrinking until I could see the small scar near his temple, the mark left by the storm that had first tied our lives together. "I came to bring something back," he said quietly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the cufflink I had found months ago, the one my son discovered beneath the blanket. "You kept this?" I whispered. He nodded. "It reminded me that someone once looked at a stranger and saw a life worth saving." My throat tightened. "You shouldn't be here. You've lost enough because of me." "Because of you?" he said, almost incredulous. "No, because of the man I used to be." He looked up at the gray sky. "I built towers to hide my guilt. You opened a door and let me be human again." I wanted to tell him that his words were too heavy for my small world. But when he smiled, tired, gentle, unguarded, I felt the truth in them. He reached for my hand. His fingers were cold. "Come home," he said simply. "This is my home," I whispered. "And you?" He shook his head. "Not the mansion. Not the company. Wherever you are, that's the only place that's ever felt real." Rain slid down my face like tears I refused to shed. "Don't say things like that," I murmured. "You'll regret them when the world forgets this scandal." He took a slow breath. "The world already forgot me, but you remembered." We stood there until the rain softened into mist. When he finally turned to leave, he paused. "There's something you should know." He looked back over his shoulder, eyes burning with something fierce and unshakable. "I'd rather lose millions than lose the hand that pulled me from the rain." And then he was gone, disappearing into the haze like the last echo of thunder. That night, after putting Rua to bed, I sat by the window, the city lights flickering like distant stars. For the first time since the storm that started it all, I didn't feel broken. He had fallen from power, but I had seen him rise as a man, and in that quiet truth, I finally understood love isn't measured by what you own, but by what you're willing to let go. Somewhere out there, he was walking through the rain again, lighter this time, and though I didn't know where the path would take us, I knew the next storm wouldn't find us as strangers. It would find us as survivors. The city finally went quiet. No headlines, no flashes, no gossip. Only the gentle hum of normal life returning for everyone except us. Weeks passed, and I heard nothing. Sometimes silence is louder than thunder. I baked bread, walked Rua to school, and pretended the ache in my chest was just the chill of autumn. Then, one afternoon, the bakery owner called from the door. Someone's asking for you." I turned, wiping flour from my hands, and there he was, standing in the golden light of dusk, his coat dusted with road dirt, eyes softer than I'd ever seen. He looked human again. "I didn't think you'd find me," I said quietly. He smiled faintly. "You forget. I've lost everything else. Finding you was the only thing left worth doing." I wanted to scold him, to tell him not to say such foolish things, but the tremor in his voice stopped me. Behind him, an old van idled, its side painted with faded letters. "Zen Foundation Mobile Clinic." "What is that?" I asked. He looked back, pride flickering in his expression. "What's left of my empire." We walked along the riverside, Rue skipping ahead, throwing pebbles into the water. Liang Zhen told me everything. How he sold his shares, liquidated his properties, and used the remaining money to build clinics for poor towns and villages. "Doctors volunteer," he said. "No fees, just help." I stopped walking. "You gave up fortune for charity?" He shrugged, eyes glinting with a quiet peace. "I didn't give it up. I traded it for something that finally lets me sleep." At the end of the river path stood a small brick building with a painted sign. "Free Health Center sponsored by the Liang Zhen Foundation." Children ran in and out with bandaged knees and bright smiles. Volunteers in white coats moved gently between them. I felt my throat tighten. "You built this?" He nodded. "It's not much, but it's a start." "Why show me?" "Because it began with you," he said simply. "You gave me your warmth. I'm just passing it on." He looked around, then added quietly, "Stay, work here. Help me build something honest." I blinked. "Me? I'm not a nurse." "You're something better," he said. "You know how to heal hearts that forgot how to beat." For a moment, all I could do was stare. His voice wasn't the voice of a man chasing redemption. It was the voice of someone who had finally found it and wanted to share it. I joined the clinic the next day. At first, it felt strange trading marble floors for cracked tiles, silk curtains for open windows. But the laughter of children and the smell of clean air filled a space that luxury never could. I swept floors, made soup for patients, taught young mothers how to boil water safely. It was humble work, but it felt holy. And every evening, when the clinic closed, Liang Zhen and I sat outside watching the sunset stain the river gold. He never talked about the company or the world that had turned its back on him. He only asked about Rui, about my favorite recipes, about my dreams before life grew cruel. "You once told me storms take everything," he said one evening, "but I think they also teach us who we really are." I looked at him, wind brushing my hair into my eyes. "And who are you now?" He smiled softly. "A man learning to be forgiven." One afternoon, Rui ran up to me, laughter bright in his voice. "Mama." Mr. Liang burned his hand on the soup pot. I rushed inside, only to find him grinning, waving his reddened hand under cold water. "I told you to let me handle the stove," I scolded. He chuckled. "I wanted to help." "You make it look too easy." Rui giggled. "See? He's just like me." Liang Zhen looked at him and laughed, a sound so unguarded, so light. It filled the small kitchen like sunlight breaking through clouds, and in that moment, something shifted. The billionaire was gone. Only the man remained. As the days turned into weeks, the town began calling him Dr. Liang, even though he wasn't one. They said he cured sadness just by showing up, and perhaps they were right, because every time he looked at me, The storm that had haunted my heart for years seemed to fade a little more. One evening, as the sky bled into crimson, he handed me a single rose, not red this time, but white. Why white? I asked. He smiled. Because it means peace. And I think we've both earned some. His fingers brushed mine, and for the first time, I didn't pull away. I spent that night writing in my diary, the same one I'd started after Wen's death, for years. The pages were filled with loss and loneliness. Now, as I wrote about the clinic, the laughter, the shared work, the sunsets, I realized I'd begun writing in color again. He'd kept his promise. He hadn't come back to a tone he'd come to change. When I closed the diary, the candle flickered like a heartbeat. Outside, the river whispered beneath the stars, and I realized that somewhere between grief and grace, love had quietly found its way home. Spring returned gently that year. The air smelled of rain and blossoms instead of fear. For the first time in years, the storms didn't sound like grief, they sounded like beginnings. The clinic had become the heart of the town. Children raced through its gates, women brought baskets of vegetables as thanks, and men who once looked down on charity now lined up to donate. And every morning, before the patients arrived, I found Liang Zhen already, their sleeves rolled, hair slightly messy, pouring tea into paper cups for volunteers. He looked nothing like the man I'd met in the storm. He'd lost his empire, yes, but somehow, he looked more powerful than ever. Careful, I teased one morning, handing him a towel. You'll start a rumor if people see you working this hard. He smiled, that small, quiet smile that had become my favorite. Let them talk. They'll never believe the truth anyway. What truth? He met my eyes. That peace is worth more than power. Rui adored him. He followed Liang everywhere, asking questions about everything from fixing pipes to writing donation letters. One evening, I heard Rui ask, "Uncle Liang, do you miss the big house?" Liang crouched beside him, wiping his hands on a rag. Sometimes. But then I remember it was too quiet. The rooms echoed when I laughed. And now? Rui asked. He smiled. Now, the walls answer back. I stood by the doorway, listening, my chest tightening with warmth I hadn't let myself feel in years. By summer, the clinic had expanded to 2 nearby villages. Liang never took credit, he always said it belonged to everyone. But the locals began calling it the House of Second Chances. It was the perfect name, because that's what it gave to people. To him. To me. One afternoon, while I was teaching the village children to read, he walked in, holding something behind his back. "Close your eyes," he said softly. I frowned. Why? Because I said so. You're always telling everyone else what to do, now it's my turn. I rolled my eyes but obeyed. Okay, you can look. I opened my eyes and froze. He was kneeling on one knee, holding out a small wooden box. Inside lay a ring carved from simple silver. Its design shaped like 2 intertwined raindrops. The children gasped, clapping before I even spoke. Liang. I whispered, trembling. He looked up at me, eyes steady, voice tender. You once gave your last bit of warmth to a dying man. I've spent every day since trying to deserve that mercy. You saved me, mine not from death, but from myself. Now I want to spend the rest of my life saving you back, for a heartbeat. I couldn't breathe. The world around us blurred, the laughter, the wind, even the fluttering of banners in the sunlight. All I saw was him. All I felt was the quiet pulse of something that had waited through storms and silence to finally bloom. Tears filled my eyes as Rui ran forward, holding the ring box like it was treasure. Mama, he said, grinning through his missing teeth. Say yes, please? I knelt beside him, hugging him close, then looked up at Liang. My voice broke when I finally spoke. Yes. The villagers cheered. Someone ran to ring the bell at the temple. Even the wind seemed to join the celebration, scattering petals across the courtyard. And when Liang slipped the ring onto my finger, I felt the warmth of every dawn. We'd survived together, he whispered. I told you storms don't just take, they return. What matters most. That night, we sat outside the clinic, watching lanterns float over the river. Rui slept against my shoulder. Yua leaned against her father's arm. The 2 children looked like they'd always belonged to the same world. His daughter, my son, now siblings in spirit if not in blood. Do you ever think about the storm? I asked quietly. He nodded. Every day. But now, when I close my eyes, I don't see lightning. What do you see? He turned toward me, the lantern light soft against his face. You, standing in the doorway, holding a candle. The night grew calm. The lanterns drifted farther away, their reflections shimmering like promises on the water, and as he took my hand, I realized something simple and profound. Love doesn't arrive in perfect weather. It walks through the rain, stumbles in the mud, and still manages to bloom. He kissed my hand, whispering against my skin, "You saved me once. Let me spend forever proving you were right to open that door." And beneath the endless stars, I finally believed him. Sometimes when the nights grow quiet and the wind moves softly through the fields, I still hear the sound of that first storm. But now, it doesn't bring fear. It brings gratitude, because I understand what I didn't then, that not every storm comes to destroy. Some come to return what was lost. Some come to show us who we are meant to meet. It's been 3 years since the day I found Liang Zhen collapsed on the road, soaked and half alive. 3 years since the night the world changed because a widow decided to open her door instead of turning it away. Now, the house we share sits on a hill above the village, surrounded by wild roses and the sound of children's laughter. Rui has grown taller, braver. He calls Liang Papa without hesitation. And little Yila, who once called me Aunt Mai, now says Mama when she needs comfort. Sometimes, as I watch them play in the garden, I wonder if my late husband can see this peace. If he knows that the woman who once broke in the rain has learned to bloom again. Every morning, I still light a candle by his photograph, not from sorrow anymore, but as a thank you. Because losing him taught me how precious a heartbeat is, and finding Liang taught me how to share mine again. The clinic has grown into a network of small shelters and hospitals across the region. Each one bears a small plaque near the entrance that reads, "For the hands that pulled us from the storm." People think it's about me, but it isn't. It's about everyone who has ever been saved and decided to save someone else. That is the circle of grace. That is the quiet revolution of kindness. Sometimes journalists still come. They ask about the scandal that ruined his empire, about the fall of the great CEO. He always answers the same way. "I didn't fall. I came home." And he smiles, not the cold, practiced smile of a businessman, but the real one he only learned after losing everything that never mattered. We still have storms. Life never promised sunshine without rain. But when thunder rolls now, Liang just reaches for my hand, and we listen together. Calm, steady, unafraid, because we both know that no storm lasts forever. And sometimes, its only purpose is to lead one soul to another. I write these words tonight by candlelight, as the world sleeps. Outside, the river whispers, the fields hum with life, and the faint scent of roses drifts through the window. My heart, once hollow with loss, now beats with quiet certainty. That kindness is never wasted. That love can grow in places that were once drowned. And that even a single open door can change the course of two lives. That was my story. Of storms and strangers. Of loss and finding. Of a widow who learned that miracles don't come in lightning, but in the gentle hands that reach through it. If you've ever opened your door to someone in need, maybe you've already welcomed your miracle too.